Hello everyone, and thanks for joining today's Ad Exchange Buyer training. Get ready for SSL. We'll be beginning in the next minute. We're just waiting for the rest of the attendees to join the call. Thanks for your patience. Hello everyone, and thank you for joining today's Ad Exchange Buyer training. Get ready for SSL. I'm Asha, your AdX trainer. Today we have product expert Alex Sinowski on the call, and he's here to help us understand what we need to do to become SSL compliant. So here's the agenda that we have for today. We're going to start off with what SSL actually is and the importance of SSL. Then we're going to go through two AdX initiatives that are in line with the SSL move. That's Ssl Ads and Ssl Call-Outs. Then we'll be walking through what you need to do to become fully SSL compliant. And then we're going to give you a run through of the tools that you can use to help you verify that you're SSL compliant. We're going to give you some key dates for the SSL move and then summarize everything in the next step section. So as you know that this is our first time we're using Hangouts on air. Some of you may have joined us with a WebEx training in the past. It's a bit different if you'd like to submit a question. In the Hangouts box you should see a Q&A panel. So if you click this button, you can submit your questions to myself and product expert Alec, and we'll answer any questions that you've submitted towards the end of the presentation. So feel free to submit your questions at any time, and we'll address them at the end. So as you know, at Google and at Exchange, our user safety is always first as our priority, and SSL encryption is critical in helping us protect data. So just a bit about SSL and what it actually is. SSL stands for Secure Socket Layer, and it's a protocol for establishing a secure connection between two parties on the internet, so that all communications transmitted through these connections are encrypted, and this therefore increases the security. And you'll also hear another related and important acronym, and that's HTTPS. And this stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. And HTTPS is actually a combination of HTTP, the web protocol, and SSL. And these are used for the connection, the secure connection of the protocol. So why is SSL important? So as I mentioned, SSL encryption is critical in helping protect data. And it's important because internet security sets the foundation for a healthy ecosystem. An ecosystem where all the players are protected. So this is consumers, and they are confident that their data is protected. Publishers can ensure their data is protected and then therefore monetize in a safe environment. And advertisers, buyers, partners can maintain consumer trust and continue reaching their customers online in the most secure way possible. And as you know, HTTPS and SSL are swiftly growing in adoption by website owners. Google and DoubleClick consider internet security a top priority, and we are protecting our partners to ensure that security efforts succeed. So for example, you may remember back in August 2014, Google search algorithms started to use HTTPS as a ranking signal, and even further back in 2013, YouTube started moving their inventory to SSL. So this means that in order to continue accessing those websites for online advertising, you have to ensure that your advertisers, clients, technology providers, anyone that you work with, that you must ensure that all aspects of your media buying is secure. And this isn't limited to, but it also includes creatives, tags, buying technologies. So making sure you work with everyone to become SSL compliant, and so that it is configured to work on HTTPS websites. Okay, so I'm going to pass over to Alec, who's going to walk us through two key ADEX initiatives that supports this theme of SSL. So over to you, Alec.
Thanks, Sasha. You can skip to the next slide, please. Excuse me. So, as Sasha mentioned, there are two key initiatives that we're rolling out behind broader SSL front. The first is Ssl Ads, and we'll go into details around what kind of changes are rolling out and what our buyers need to do as a result of those changes in order to become compliant. But at a higher level, the main purpose of Ssl Ads is to make sure that the communication between the creative loading on a user's page, on a user's web page, and the user's browser is secure. So what does that mean? That means that everything involved with the creative load, whether it's the ad tag itself or any pixel or third-party tag that's fired during the creative load, has to be secure. That way there's not a single non-secure pixel fired on the web page while the creative is loading there. The second main initiative that we're rolling out is Ssl Call-Outs. So Ssl Call-Outs is a completely separate process from Ssl Ads, and is really all about securing our bidders. So making sure that the communication between Ad Exchange and every single one of the bidders that is integrated with Ad Exchange is HTTPS and secure. So again, just at a higher level, Ssl Call-Outs is mandatory and will impact every single bidder that's integrated with Ad Exchange. Ssl Ads will impact anyone who's buying inventory via AdX. Doesn't matter if you are an RTB or non-RTB buyer, and it doesn't matter if you are bidding on your own behalf or using a third-party bidder to bid on your behalf. Ssl Ads will impact everyone. Ssl Callouts will impact all of our bidders. So that said, we can dive into a few details on what's changing across Ssl Ads. Okay, so there are two main changes that are really pushing things forward with Ssl Ads and making more of our inventory require SSL compliant creatives. So first, from the publisher's perspective, as Asha mentioned, last year around August, Google announced that we were going to start using page security, whether the actual web page is HTTPS or not, as a ranking signal in our search algorithms to determine their organic search result ranking. So what that means is that publishers are now encouraged to move their entire site over from HTTP to HTTPS. When a publisher moves their site over to HTTPS, that actually converts all of their ad inventory across their site to become HTTPS as well. So when that happens, that means that their ad inventory will require an SSL compliant creative. So that's one process that's already begun, and publishers are doing that on their own. At the same time, Google is also moving all of the ad inventory inventory that's accessible via Ad Exchange to become SSL. So whether or not the publisher has already made their entire site HTTPS, Google is going ahead and making their ad inventory SSL on a rolling basis. So we've started doing so back with YouTube and some of our other owned and operated properties in 2013. We started making them SSL. So as of now, nearly all of our inventory available via YouTube is SSL. And as of November, we announced that we were making 5% of the inventory that you can access via Ad Exchange SSL. And we'll be gradually ramping that up until it's at 100% sometime within the year. So at some point in 2015, all of our inventory, every single impression that you can access through Ad Exchange will be SSL and require an SSL compliant creative. So what does this mean for you, for our buyers? So the primary thing is that whether the publisher has made their site secure or whether Google is making the ad inventory secure, any secure impression, any impression for an SSL inventory will require an SSL compliant creative and also require that the bidder bidding on the impression declare use of SSL. So we'll walk through now what those steps mean and what exactly is required from the buyer side. The last thing I wanted to point out is that if you respond with a creative as not SSL compliant for an SSL impression, we will filter that response out of the auction. So when our inventory does become completely SSL, if you don't have SSL compliant creatives and are not bidding correctly on that inventory, we will filter all of your bids out of the auction. Okay, so let's look at the overall process for how to become SSL ready for the Ssl Ads initiative. So this says there are 5 main steps, but really there are 3 core steps, and the last 2 are more verification and monitoring whether or not you're fully ready. So we'll walk through the first 3. So number 1, you really first need to make sure that your pre-targeting settings, whether you're an RTB buyer or a non-RTB buyer, are configured so that you're eligible to receive bid requests for SSL inventory. And we'll walk through a few screenshots so you can see in both of our UIs where you need to make those changes to ensure that you're including SSL inventory. The second is ensuring that your bidder is not ignoring bid requests for SSL inventory and that you're actually bidding correctly on SSL inventory, meaning that you are in fact declaring use of SSL when you are bidding on an SSL impression. And the third and probably meatiest part of this is making sure that when you are bidding on an SSL impression, that you are responding with an SSL compliant creative. And we'll talk a bit more as to why that's a little more complicated. And then the last 2 pieces here are really around making sure you understand how you can use our tools and reporting to verify whether or not you're getting filtered on any SSL impressions because you may be responding with a non-SSL compliant creative, and what you need to do to update your non-SSL compliant creatives so that they are in fact SSL compliant and can run on any of our SSL inventory. Okay, so going back to step 1, what do you need to do to make sure that you are opted in and including SSL inventory? So if you're an RTB buyer, you are going to be modifying or looking at your pre-targeting settings within the new pre-targeting UI that we moved all of those campaigns over to in the second half of last year. So hopefully this UI is familiar for the RTB buyers on the call. But the main thing you need to look at is the creative attribute for each of your pre-targeting configurations. So if you are within, if you're editing one of your pre-targeting configurations, you'll see within creative attributes, there's a specific attribute labeled Rich Media Capability Non-SSL. You want to make sure that that is not included. So you want to make sure that that is not explicitly targeted. So the way it appears in the screenshot is that there is no inclusion of Rich Media Capability Non-SSL. That's how you want it to look. That means that you are able to receive bid requests for SSL inventory. If you did have the non-SSL creative attribute included there, that would basically exclude your pre-targeting configuration from being eligible to receive any bid requests for SSL inventory. Okay, now moving on to what this looks like for non-RTB buyers, for our UI buyers. So there are really 2 steps involved here. One is making sure that the snippet or ad tag that you're providing in the HTML section of the ad level settings is secure. So again, just ensuring that the contents of that HTML field there support the HTTPS scheme. So you actually need to make sure you update that portion of the ad of your third-party creative there. And then the second step is just making sure that you have the SSL checkbox checked off. That will tell our system that the creative that you have inserted there is SSL compliant and will make it eligible for you to receive bidder requests for SSL inventory. Once you've completed both of those steps, make sure to save ad. Otherwise, we will not register those changes. And then once you hit save ad, that will then go through our ad review process. So one really important suggestion would be that instead of updating existing SSL or instead of updating existing creatives, I would recommend adding a new creative to make that SSL, so that you can have that one go through the ad review process, wait for it to get approved, then you can go back and pause the previous or original creative that you had running, and activate or resume the new SSL creative that you've run. That way you're not losing out on any traffic while you're waiting for the creative to get reviewed and approved within our system. Okay, so moving on to step 2, making sure that you are actually bidding on a Ssl inventory and responding correctly. So how do you recognize whether an impression requires use of an SSL creative or not? It's pretty simple. There's one main field within the bid request called excluded attribute. If you see the value 48 in that excluded attribute field, that tells you that an SSL compliant ad is required because the impression is for SSL inventory. If you do not see 48 present in the excluded attribute field, that means that an SSL compliant ad is not required. However, you can still respond on those impressions with SSL creatives, which is why we recommend whether or not the impression itself requires SSL, you should still be running SSL creatives across all of our inventory because they'll be able to run on either SSL or non-SSL traffic. The second piece here is within your response. So if you're bidding on an SSL impression, you need to then tell us within your response that the creative you're responding with is SSL compliant. And for that, you just make sure to declare 47 at the creative attribute field. And the last thing here is that if the only thing that needs to change in the tag is the scheme, so updating HTTP to become HTTPS, you can make it a little easier for yourself and just use the scheme macro. And that should automatically update the HTTP portion to HTTPS, depending on the environment of the page. So if the web page that the ad is loading on is secure in HTTPS, that will allow it to update to just HTTPS. All right, so here's where we get to the fun part, which is how to ensure that you're actually responding with an SSL compliant creative. So the reason why this is a little tricky is because it's not just as simple as making sure that the ad tag that you're giving us in the response is HTTPS. That is one piece of it that we need. But the other piece is that every single pixel, every single call, anything that's fired while the creative is loading or anything within the creative has to be HTTPS based. If we detect a single non-secure pixel that's fired, we will then label that response and that creative as being non-secure, and it will get filtered out of the auction for any SSL impression. And the reason why this is complicated is because oftentimes within a creative you have several different parties involved. There's technology providers, third or fourth party vendors who are working with the advertiser in question. There are creative agencies who are actually putting together the creatives themselves, and there may be child creative calls made during the creative load. And you need to make sure that you're working with all of these parties, like media agencies and ad servers, to ensure that every single piece of the creative itself is HTTPS. And there are some tools and some reports that we can provide you to verify, what particular call was not secure and cause the creative to become non-SSL compliant. And we'll go through those in a little bit. You can go through and animate the full slide, Asha. So this is just kind of a summary of what we just discussed here. So again, as we are making all of our inventory SSL, which will become the case at some point within 2015, all of our inventory will be SSL and require SSL compliant creatives. You need to ensure that every single piece of the creative that you're responding with is secure. And to help you better understand which creatives are getting filtered because they're including a non-SSL creative, and what are the specific subdomains or tags that are causing that non-SSL compliance, your AdX rep will be able to give you a thorough report of every single creative ID and every specific subdomain that's causing non-SSL compliance. And then there are a couple tools that I'll show you screenshots of that you can use as well, in more of a self-service model. But really, for any of the creatives that we find or that you find that are non-SSL compliant, for the most part, you are going to have to work with advertisers, agencies, any of the third or fourth parties that they're working with to ensure that the creative that you're running and every piece within it is SSL compliant. Okay, so switching gears a little bit and moving off of Ssl Ads and now talking about Ssl Call-Outs. So again, Ssl Call-Outs, completely separate process from Ssl Ads, has nothing to do with the inventory itself. It's specifically about the relationship and communication between Ad Exchange and each of the bidders integrated with Ad Exchange. So really, what we're doing here is we're requiring by June 30th that every single bidder enable HTTPS for their bidder, which means that they are going to secure their bidder endpoint. So you can see in the example here, a sample non-secure bidder endpoint would start with HTTP, and the secure version of that, which we would have within our system and send actual traffic to and receive responses from, would be the secure version, HTTPS. And the main thing I want to point out here is that as each bidder is moving over to the secure version of their bidder endpoint, they don't have to, all in one go, move all the traffic over from the non-secure bidder endpoint to the secure bidder endpoint. You can actually test the secure bidder endpoint with a small percentage of traffic while you're simultaneously receiving the rest of your traffic on your non-secure bidder endpoint. So you can run both at the same time while you're trying to ensure that everything with the secure bidder endpoint is working correctly. And your AdX rep can also work with you to ensure that the transition, the migration between the non-secure and secure bidder endpoint is going smoothly. And that migration or that transition can happen either as slowly or as quickly as you want, as long as it happens by June 30th. The consequence of not being on the secure bidder endpoint by June 30th is that your bidder will basically stop receiving traffic from Ad Exchange. So this is a requirement for every single bidder by June 30th. And the other thing I wanted to point out there, just because we wanted to keep it a little lighter for this call, is that you will be receiving more in-depth documentation if you are a bidder on the exact steps required to help you move your bidder endpoint over to becoming secure. So we'll follow up with more information on that. Okay, so moving over to some of the tools that you can use to verify whether or not creatives are SSL compliant and whether or not you're actually getting filtered for bidding on SSL inventory with non-SSL creatives. So there are three main things. On the creative side, you can use either the snippet status report or the REST API if you are integrated with the REST API. In either case, regardless of which tool you're using, we'll be able to tell you for a specific creative whether or not we have detected a non-secure call or non-secure domain within the creative, and we'll tell you what the specific flag was, so what the specific pixel or call within the creative was that actually flagged our system for that creative to not be SSL compliant. And again, you can use either snippet status report or REST API. They'll both give you very similar information. And on the filtering reporting side, you can use R2B Breakout, which I'll walk through a couple screenshots so you can see how to look at that. But R2B Breakout is a great tool that we've actually just released for all of our eligible accounts this week, which you'll be hearing more information about from your AdX rep. And through R2B Breakout, you'll be able to see in-depth reporting on what's driving a lot of your filtering. And one of the main filter reasons that you can drill into, which we'll show you in just a couple slides, is which of your creative IDs are causing non-SSL filtering, or filtering on SSL inventory because you have a non-SSL creative. Okay, so for the REST API and snippet status report, these are just a couple sample corrections that you can see for a couple different SSL related issues here. So the first one is for mixed content. So basically, there's a mix of SSL and non-SSL content within the snippet, which caused the overall creative to be non-SSL, and resulting in it being filtered out of the auction for that impression. And we blurred out the exact information, but you can see there that we highlight the exact pixel, the exact tag that caused the mix of SSL and non-SSL content. And in the second example, we've actually flagged the Invalid Ssl Certificate. So we'll show you that as well if that's what's causing the creative or snippet to be labeled non-SSL. Again, for R2B breakout, once you log into your AdX buyer account, you'll be able to see in the bidding tab on the left-hand side, there's a tool there called R2B breakout that you should be taken to automatically once you click on bidding. Within that, if you scroll down to where it shows you the amount of bids, you'll be able to see a highlighted portion called filter bids, and that's showing you the number of bids for each of the top filtering reasons that are causing all of your filtering. And if you see that one of the top filtering reasons for your account is excluded attribute declared, you'll want to click within that because that is where we include any of the filtering for non-SSL creative on an SSL impression. So you can see that here. This is just a sample. Once you've clicked within the excluded attribute declared, you'll see a window appear just like this one that displays the top 10 creatives that are causing any of the excluded attribute declared filtering. And if you see any that have a disapproval reason, rich media capability non-SSL, those are the creative IDs where there is a non-SSL creative running on or trying to run on an SSL impression. So you'll just identify those within that window. Those are the top priority ones because those are the ones causing the most filtering, and you can see the number of bids filtered in the left-hand column, and then you can see the creative ID in the middle column there. And so those are the specific creatives where you can prioritize on your side which advertisers you'll need to work with to update those specific creatives to become SSL compliant. Great. So now we can look at our timeline to see how all of this is rolling out throughout the year. So as I mentioned, just to give some background and some context here, so really SSL for Ad Exchange started back in 2013 when YouTube and a few other Google O&O properties started moving their inventory over to SSL. As I said, YouTube is already nearly fully rolled over to SSL. So if you are interested or bidding on a lot of video creative or video inventory, you already need to make sure, you probably already know about how important SSL is for YouTube video inventory. The next big milestone was that in August of 2014, Google Search announced that their algorithms were using HTTPS page security as a ranking signal, which was one of the main sparks to influence publishers to move their entire sites over from HTTP to HTTPS. And that's been happening since August and will continue to happen. And then in November of last year, we announced that we were rolling 5% of our inventory accessible through Ad Exchange over to SSL, and we'll continue that process until 100% of our inventory is SSL, which will happen at some point within this year. Once we have finalized timing, you'll hear more about those specific milestones from your AdX rep. And the last milestone here is specific to SSL callouts. So every bidder will need to be on an HTTPS bidder endpoint by the end of June, by June 30th. Otherwise, you will lose out on traffic from Ad Exchange as of July 1st. Okay, so that was a lot of information that I just threw at you. So I wanted to sort of quickly summarize and take a step back and look at the next steps for both SSL Ads and Ssl Call-Outs. So again, for SSL Ads, a few main things you need to do to ensure that you are ready for all of our traffic becoming SSL. First thing is ensuring that your pre-targeting settings, again, whether you're in the RTB pre-targeting or non-RTB pre-targeting, are set up to include SSL traffic. So making sure that you're not including rich media non-capability as non-SSL. The second thing is ensuring that your bidder is responding to bidder requests for SSL traffic, and that your bidder is declaring use of SSL within the bid response. And the last thing is, when you are responding on SSL traffic, making sure that the entire creative and every pixel included within it is HTTPS. Otherwise, we will flag the creative as non-SSL, and it will not be allowed to run any SSL inventory. And on the SSL callout side, again, this is all about managing the process of moving your bidder endpoint over from HTTP to HTTPS, which can happen either as quickly or slowly as you need it to, as long as it happens by June 30th. And your ADX rep will be following up with more information and thorough steps around exactly what you need to do to make that a smooth process. Okay, and with that, we can move on to any questions that any of our viewers have for SSL ads or SSL callouts.
Yep. So thanks for that, Alec. We had the first question that came in from Jerry. I can take. Will we be able to get a copy of this presentation to share with the rest of our organisation? Yes, of course. So probably the end of this week, early next week, all these recordings will be uploaded to the Ad Exchange Help Center, so you'll be able to access the recording again in case you missed anything, and the presentation will be forwarded to you by your ADX rep. So no worries about that one. So we had a couple of other questions. So I think a good question that came in, I have to look to you, Alec, for this one. So Shoila asked, we have issues with our ads being approved, and then later ads are disapproved for SSL reasons, but then when the ADX team reviews the ads, they don't see any issues. So it could be maybe specific to this one account, but do you see why, like, what would cause that, and how we would prevent that from happening?
Yeah, definitely. So that is something that we've heard of from a few clients, and I think what the biggest cause is of ads being temporarily recognized as non-SSL is that sometimes we will, in the first scan, detect that a non-secure version of a pixel is being fired within a creative, and an update may have been made within the creative, and it could still be the same creative ID, and it's just not triggering another scan until our system recognizes that it needs to rescan the creative. So until that rescan happens after the creative has been updated, we may not recognize that it's been changed to include the secure version of that pixel. So if you do need a creative rescanned because it has now been updated to be SSL compliant, what you can always do is resubmit that creative through the REST API, and that should trigger a rescan of the creative.
Cool. We had another good question that came in, actually. So, what happens to all creatives that are approved now, but are not non-SSL compliant? Will they get rejected?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So that's specifically about creative disapproval. So when we detect a creative as non-SSL, we actually don't disapprove it. We'll just filter the response if it's for a bid on an SSL impression. So again, we're not disapproving it, we're just filtering it. For again, I believe it's the filtering reason is excluded attribute declared. And then there's a secondary question from the same person. So, does this require all fourth-party calls within the creative to be secure as well, or just the creative itself? So literally everything within the creative, and any third or fourth-party call that's fired while the creative is loading has to be secure.
Cool. Is there going to be more communication on ADX's plans to ramp up SSL traffic? So 5% of traffic is now SSL. Is there going to be communication when it becomes sort of 100% and along the way?
Definitely. So as of right now, we are gradually increasing the amount of our traffic that is SSL. But once we do have more finalized timelines around key milestones, like say when we plan on getting to 25%, 50%, 75%, 100%, we'll definitely share that information. So expect to hear more on that from us shortly.
Okay, if anyone has any other questions, please do submit them in via the Q&A panel.
Okay, I see there are a couple more here. So can you please go over the rich media portion you mentioned at the end of the presentation? Well, I'm not sure about the rich media portion. The only thing that I can think of related to rich media would be that if a parent creative file has child creative assets, you need to make sure that any call made to those child creative assets are secure as well. So again, not just the parent creative file needs to be secure, but also the child creative files that are being called. Those need to be secure as well. So hopefully I understood that question correctly. Otherwise, feel free to respond back in, and hopefully we can get to it before this call is over.
Okay, we had a question from Joe that came in. So once SSL compliance is required on all ADX imagery, can you discuss the re-approval process for any creatives that fail the SSL audit? I think we had a similar one earlier.
Yep. So if you're integrated with a REST API and you want a rescan of a specific creative because you've updated it, you can always resubmit that creative through the REST API. Otherwise, another quick way to have a creative rescan is actually submit it under a new creative ID. So we'll recognize that the creative is coming through under a new ID, and we will scan that within our system and detect whether there's any non-secure tag or pixel being used.
Cool. Okay, that was all the questions. We have a couple more slides to just give you a few reminders. So if anyone has any questions while the last few slides are being presented, then here's your opportunity to submit them in. So just wanted to give you a quick training reminder. If you haven't completed the ADX via fundamentals, you can do so via this short link there. It's case sensitive, so if you're typing it into your browser, it's goo.gl/c, the number 58, lowercase r, capital S 1. And this is a 10 module course, and it goes through the basics of ADX, what is ADX, who buys on the ADX exchange, all through to RTB buying. So it's a really, really good course and really recommend that. If you've already done the fundamentals or you're already clued up and you haven't received your ADX certification, then you can jump straight to the certification exam. It's a short 20-question exam, not too tough. So you can do so via that link there. So goo.gl/lowercase ppj uppercase rp lowercase u. So you can do so at any time. It's self-paced, so you can go through that at any time you want. And just to give you a couple of reminders about resources available. SSL Facts and One-Sheeter is a high-level overview of SSL, what's changing, and who you need to talk to during the process. That can be received from your ADX rep, or if you wait for a follow-up email to the training, I'll include a link in that. Also, Alec mentioned that there's a extensive guide to securing your call-outs, so the bidder's guide to securing call-outs. That will also be included in the follow-up email via your ADX rep. And if you wanted more information now, you can access the SSL Implementation Help Center, again via that short link there, goo.gl, the number 6, uppercase T 94, lowercase gl. So you can do so now if you'd like. And also, just to mention, if you have any feedback from this session, are you liking Hangouts on Air? Are you not liking it? Please do let us know via this short survey. So you can access it there, goo.gl/lowercase az, the number 2, uppercase C, lowercase tg. We really do appreciate your feedback, and we love hearing from you. And also, as this is Hangouts on Air, the video will be uploaded to YouTube and also sent in the follow-up email. So you can also rate the video as well, and you can also actually comment on the videos now. So if you have any questions, you can do so, and we can get back to you via that.
Asha, it looks like there's one other question came in. So for the transition period, do you suggest to create or have 2 ads available for each size for each ad group, one that's SSL compliant and one that's not? So yes, but only at first when you are waiting for the new SSL compliant creative to be fully reviewed and approved within our system. Once you have the SSL version of the creative reviewed and approved, there's not really any reason to keep the non-SSL version running at the same time. As I mentioned earlier, if the creative is SSL compliant, it can run on any of our impressions, whether they require SSL or not. So once you have an SSL creative, you can pause the original non-SSL one and only run the SSL compliant one.
Nice. Thanks for that, Alec. I think that was all the questions there. Do you see any more there?
Nope. It looks like the end of the questions.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Really great questions there, and thank you very much for attending. I hope you found this presentation useful. Thanks so much, Alec, for your knowledge on SSL. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it, and please do join us for a upcoming training session. We'll also be sending you a follow-up to this training anyway, in case you missed anything. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.